Today we are going to talk about Bitcoin mining. The topic is coming back in a big way with the fall of Bitcoin's price. The purpose of this video is to explain the last survivor principle. It is thanks to it that we can understand who are the big winners and losers in the crypto mining business. It is also this principle that is at the origin of the CleanSat mining company, a company that we are creating with Guillaume in association with Real IT and Sébastien Gispiu. Come on, let's go! First, in a few sentences, let's lay down the basics of mining in order to understand the subject. The purpose of mining is to synchronize and secure the Bitcoin blockchain. So that you understand how it works, let's follow the path of a transaction from an exchange platform. For example, Paymium, our trusted partner where we advise you to buy your Bitcoins. So, if I ask Paymium to transfer my Bitcoins to my own ledger key, Paymium will initiate an on-chain transaction from the Paymium wallet to your private wallet. This transaction will land in the mempool, a sort of waiting list of all the Bitcoin transactions not yet processed. It is important to know that the space in each block is limited, so the miners will scan the mempool and select the transactions with the highest fees. This is a classic auction system. The higher the fee you attach to your transaction, the more likely you are to be in the next block. So, after selecting the most economically interesting transactions, the miners will try to find the code for a lock with billions of combinations, and they have no choice but to try these combinations one after the other at random. So, you can think of it as a huge lottery where you have to find a winning key called a hash to be able to submit the block to the network. As soon as a miner has found one winning hash, he or she propagates his block in all the nodes of the network, i.e. the computers running the Bitcoin protocol. Verify that there has been no cheating. This step is almost instantaneous and requires very little energy. If everything is okay, the miner's block is added to the Bitcoin blockchain, and we start again. The miner who finds the combination to the lock and has his or her block added to the chain is rewarded for his or her efforts by reaping freshly created Bitcoins and the transaction fees of all operations included in the block. Understand that miners can make as many attempts as they want to find the right key, but the number of attempts they can make is proportional to the computing power they have. And that's where computers come in. ASICs, machines designed specifically for mining, can test several hundred billion combinations per second. So, in the end, the more computing power a miner has, the faster he can find the winning key and collect the associated reward. This is why mining consumes a lot of electricity, and this is an essential parameter that we will analyze later. To be a perfectionist and to impress your friends, remember that the mining activity secures a blockchain thanks to the draw of a miner who will generate the next block, and that this draw cannot be faked because to play, you have to spend real energy. It is therefore not possible to play without betting in some way. Then, the blocks are validated by the nodes of the network. This verification activity requires very little energy because it is simple to do and almost instantaneous. A Bitcoin node is simply a small computer that contains the Bitcoin core software and the entire transaction history of the Bitcoin blockchain. So, that's a Bitcoin node. Anyone can have one at home, and that's one of the most important goals of the Bitcoin community, to allow any individual to have the protocol at home. That's true decentralization. No middleman. It is important to know that a node does not bring any reward, but at the same time, it does not cost much either. Just a little bit of electricity. There is no middleman between you and Bitcoin. Now that the foundations are laid, let's get down to the business of mining. On the charge or expense side, a miner will have the purchase of the ASICs, the famous machines specialized in the Bitcoin lottery, the cost of electricity to run them, and the labor for operation and maintenance. Let's simplify by neglecting the weight of labor because it generally represents little compared to the price of electricity and machines. Then, on the revenue side, the turnover of a miner will be composed of the number of Bitcoins mined multiplied by the market price at the time these Bitcoins were sold. To calculate how much you will earn from mining, you need to go into a little more detail about the lottery conditions. Bitcoin produces a block every 10 minutes on average, and the winning miner's reward in Bitcoins is 6.25 Bitcoins. Since May 11, 2020, this is the date of the last halving. In a nutshell, to understand what halvings are, a Bitcoin protocol has been issuing Bitcoins with each block since January 3, 2009. Bitcoin is designed to issue 21 million tokens in a decreasing fashion over time. Between January 3, 2009 and November 28, 2012, each block was paying 50 Bitcoins, and then every 210,000 blocks, about every 4 years, the reward is halved. That's what halvings are all about. In the end, miners will not earn any more Bitcoins once they have mined 21 million. They will only be paid through the transaction fees we talked about earlier. At least that's the idea. We have just made a whole video about it if you're interested. Now that you know where the money comes from, you need to know how it is allocated to the miners connected to the network. This is relatively simple. To successfully mine a block and earn Bitcoins, you need to put as much computing power as possible into the network. Your chance of winning is proportional to your weight on the network. So if the computing power of your machines is 1% of the total power of the network, you can estimate that you will earn 1% of the 6.25 Bitcoins, or 0.06 Bitcoins per block. Then you convert these Bitcoins into dollars and you have your revenue. Now that you have a good understanding of a miner's business model, let's look at how the industry is structured. Who are the lottery competitors? Let's rank them according to their CO2 emissions and the price they pay for electricity for their machines. The price of electricity is the first factor that determines the profitability of a miner, because if the price of machinery for industrialists is more or less the same for everyone at a given time, T. Then, his CO2 emissions will determine whether it is a target or not with regard to current and future carbon regulations to combat global warming. So, we have a typology of miners that is taking shape. First, you understand that if you have a high cost of electricity and you use high carbon energy, you are at a dead end because your future is very precarious. So at the bottom left, we have dead ends to be avoided. In the dead ends, we will find, for example, the Bitcoin miner in the city center of Berlin in Germany, because German electricity is very carbonated. But this is generally true for all individuals who pay full price for their electricity. Then, at the top left, you'll find those who pay low electricity prices but emit a lot of greenhouse gases. Economically, they are viable, but politically, they will very quickly be the target of carbon regulations. I call this category the targets because their future is compromised because socially their business is environmentally unacceptable. Then, at the bottom right, you have the miners who have expensive but low carbon electricity. I call them the born dead because their business may be green, but it is economically unsustainable. For example, if you try to mine in France with solar panels, you will most likely find yourself in this configuration. Finally, at the top right, you have the most enviable miners because they have cheap electricity and low greenhouse gas emissions. They are the survivors because in the long run, they will be the only ones to survive in this business. It is this type of mining that should be of interest to an investor who wishes to gain exposure to Bitcoin, profitable and socially acceptable. Another way of looking at this matrix is that in the top quadrants you have the professional miners and at the bottom the amateurs. Finally, to be really exhaustive, we also need to talk about one last criterion for your mining site to be viable in the long run: non-competitiveness on the networks. No matter what type of miner you are, your future is in jeopardy if your activity competes with the energy consumption of local people. If a miner wants to be socially useful and accepted, he has to use energy that no one else needs. This is called overcapacity. So even if you use cheap green energy but you draw electricity from the grid that would have been useful to Mrs. Michu for cooking or heating, then your activity takes a big risk of being banned. The concept of overcapacity seems strange in the West because the production capacities are rather well optimized. But you should know that in the world, there is more than enough of this overcapacity to run the Bitcoin network several times. Now, to understand what the last survivor rule is, we need to look at the dynamics of the mining business in relation to the evolution of the price of Bitcoin. When the price of Bitcoin rises, many miners appear on the network, starting with the dead ends and the born dead, because installing machines in places where electricity is expensive becomes profitable. Then professionals appear. The higher the price of Bitcoin, the more the industry becomes structured and grows. The consequence is that this increases the competition on the network. The small miners at the bottom of this matrix start to suffer because their relative power on the network gradually decreases. This is the famous percentage we were talking about earlier. And when this parameter decreases, the revenue and profit margin automatically decreases too. However, if the Bitcoin price remains stable, small miners still manage to earn a little bit of money. But as always, since 2009 with Bitcoin, a bear market phase occurs. The nasty bear market. As we said before, the turnover of miners is directly correlated to the price of Bitcoin. When the price drops, miners are caught in a bind. Some spend more than they earn, so they shut down their machines. And this is where it gets very interesting and fun to watch because there's a double dynamic. Certainly, when Bitcoin drops, your income drops. However, when your competitors on the network turn off their machines, your relative power compared to the rest of the network increases, so you get more Bitcoin. To understand the last survivor principle, let's say there are just 4 miners on the Bitcoin network, each with the same amount of computing power. However, they do not pay the same price for electricity and do not have the same impact on the environment. The first one, John Kevin, is a private individual who mines in Paris. Therefore, on nuclear electricity, which is non-carbonated but expensive at 20 euro cents. He belongs to the category of the dead-born because his business is not competitive, and moreover, as he mines on the electricity of the national network, his activity will be identified as parasitic and the French government will track him down. The second, Hans, is another private individual who mines in Berlin, Germany on black electricity produced mainly with gas and coal at a price of 30 euro cents. Similarly, Hans will be targeted by the authorities because he also takes his electricity from the grid. The third, Drill Baby Drill, is a mining company in Texas that mines on locally produced oil and gas in a brown field. The local authorities are quite happy because since the former industries have relocated, nobody exploits the local resources anymore because it is cheaper to import oil than to produce it locally. Drill Baby Drill pays 3 euro cents for its electricity. We therefore put it in the target category because this company's activity is in the crosshairs of carbon regulations despite the economic interest of this activity for the region. Finally, for the last company, the survivor type, we will take the company CleanSat Mining, which mines exclusively on extra green energy capacity such as hydroelectric dams in African countries, for example. The price of electricity is about 4 euro cents. The mining activity is beneficial to the region because the purchase of electricity from the local company and the taxes collected from the activity allow the country to develop their energy distribution network. CleanSat Mining's model is to help countries reduce their extra capacity by helping to finance infrastructure. Once the green generation source is fully connected to the grid, CleanSat Mining moves its containers to be used on other extra capacity in the world. In this case, mining acts as a vector for the development of energy production and distribution infrastructures where there is a need. Finally, on hydroelectric energy, the environmental impact is neutral. With CleanSat Mining, you have to consume more to live better. As we said at the beginning, in this scenario, these 4 miners do not all have the same costs, but they earn the same because they have the same computing power. 25% of the rewards each. Now, let's imagine that Bitcoin loses 50% of its value. The miners John Kevin and Hans are no longer profitable. They may hold out for a while dipping into their cash flow, but if the bear market lasts too long, they will be forced to shut down their operations. The Drill Baby Drill and CleanSat Mining miners also saw their margins decrease during the bear market, but their cost structure allowed them to resist the winter. On the other hand, when John Kevin and other Hanses turn off their machine, the relative power of Drill Baby Drill and CleanSat Mining increases. They now have 50% of the network and share the rewards between them. Now you understand the dynamics. The drop in the price is compensated by an increase in your relative power on the network, and therefore your income, on one condition: survive. In other words, Bitcoin will survive. The question is whether you survive long enough to benefit from it. The second bonus effect is that when Bitcoin goes up again, the survivors of the last bear market are reaping record profits. And yes, their facilities are already up and running ahead of the competition, which takes weeks or months to come back online. We believe that the last survivor principle will gradually drive out everything that is mining on fossil fuels and/or in competition with the use of local populations. Because these energy sources are structurally more expensive, mining will therefore naturally become more and more green and useful because it has this capacity to fetch energy that nobody knows how to use otherwise. It is precisely on this principle of the last survivor that CleanSat Mining is based. The idea is simple: tokenize mining containers that are powered by the cheapest non-carbon electricity in the world. CleanSat Mining's word clean is not a hollow one. All our operations are based on 100% renewable energy produced exclusively from extra capacity so as not to compete with the users of the local population, and in socially responsible operating conditions for the local operating personnel. We want to check all the boxes to become an eligible investment for institutions, companies, and large fortunes that have environmental, social, and responsible governance criteria. But that's not all. CleanSat mining is also opening up the mining industry to individuals, significantly lowering the minimum entry ticket to a few dozen euros. We are not there yet because, as you can imagine, the regulatory requirements to offer this kind of product are numerous. It will take several more months to obtain all the authorizations and accreditations. We are working very hard to make this project a reality. To be kept up to date with CleanSat mining news, subscribe to the mailing list on the CleanSatMining.com website. We are working as fast as we can, but we are doing it right. The goal with electricity at about 4 euro cents is to remain the last survivor and to be among the lowest cost global players. We have some very good opportunities, whether it's on underexploited hydroelectric dams or on what we call fatal energy. The most emblematic case with huge volumes is that of flares on isolated oil extraction sites, such as offshore drilling platforms. Here, mining solves both an environmental problem, the unburned gases from the flares, and an economic problem since it allows to economically valorize the gas that is not exploitable today and that gushes out from oil drilling on isolated sites. Again, for those who are interested, we made a video a few weeks ago. But is it profitable to mine rather than buy Bitcoin directly on a regular basis without questioning? This regular fragmented buying strategy is called DCA, for dollar cost average, and it is a particularly effective strategy because it allows you to smooth out your entry price on Bitcoin. In simple terms, mining structurally offers you the possibility to make DCA, but with a discounted Bitcoin price because you produce it yourself in an industrial way. However, once again, it is the principle of the last survivor that will determine the return on your investment. Last but not least, we build a compensation structure that is fully adaptable to market conditions and with full transparency. For those who know the seriousness of the real IT platform, you know what we mean. Simply put, in lean times, we will lower our compensation and vice versa. If you are subscribed to the Grand Angle Crypto newsletter, you know that one of our principles is, we win together, we lose together. Anyway, we'll tell you all about these details in a video dedicated to the launch of CleanSat mining. On that note, see you soon for new videos. Ciao!